Might have. Thank God. We should get the leg.
4, 3, 2, 1.
And we're live. This is The Human Condition. I'm Vince Orlando.
I'm Steve. I'm Sean.
How's it going, guys?
Awesome. How are you?
Fantastic, man. Fantastic. Loving the changing colors. Getting into fall mode. I love spring. I love fall. They're my two favorite seasons. But fall, this time of fall is, I think, hands down my favorite. I love the cider mills. I love the changing colors. It's leading into the holidays, but it's not the holidays yet. I don't know. It feels good to me. I like it.
I don't like holidays.
I love the holidays. I wait all year for Christmas to come back around. I love that whole part of the year. It used to be very stressful. I think I'm a different person now, but I dig them. I dig them. So anyway, we're going a little bit off, not off subject, because we're still going to talk about some very important subjects. But once in a blue moon, a film comes along that strikes a nerve at the level of pop culture. It's got pop culture appeal. It can hit the masses, but the message, or messages rather, that are underlying the plot of the story are so relevant to current times, and it doesn't happen that often. Before we get talking about the Joker is that movie. Before we get talking about the Joker, we want to let you guys know that you can chime in with your take on anything that we're talking about, the Joker specifically today, but anything we're talking about at HC Podcast 313. That's our Twitter handle. And then obviously, if you're tuned into the Facebook Live, you can comment there as well. But today, our subject's going to be the Joker. Thank you, Sean, for pushing me to see it. It was a must-see for me anyway, but then your take on it really spun me in to motivation to where I popped out, saw a matinee myself, and I haven't stopped thinking about it since.
I don't push too many movies. You know, it's interesting. My dad raised me on movies and stuff, and all the classics, all the art movies, he wanted to be a cinematographer in Hollywood back in the day, so I know a lot about movies, and I don't go to the movie theater very often, 4 times a year maybe. When someone had seen this movie at work and was like, you need to see this. He's a social worker, and he was like, you need to go see it. And I was like, yeah, I wasn't ready for another Joker movie. That's why I haven't seen it yet. Yeah, it's not. I'm being obstinate about it. It's not a comic book movie. No. And so I went and saw it. And I walked out, number one, Joaquin's performance is hands down, in the same category as, Jack Nicholson, When It Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah.
We were talking about, would it be close to Robert De Niro in Taxi Driver? The performance was perfect. The message, it resonated with me a lot.
Yeah.
It's going to resonate with anyone who's ever dealt with depression, dealt with societal bullshit, and you end up rooting for him. A friend of mine was I was like, what was your take on it? He was like, kill the rich. And I was like, to me, I get that, but there was a whole deeper underlying. When I walked out of that movie, it had stirred up a lot of darkness in me that I had suppressed, and I was pretty much fucked up until, because the last time, when I saw the movie, it was our last podcast, and I didn't really get right until a half hour before we were doing the show, and yeah, it just it hurt. It hurt.
That's the genius, and I don't know if it's intended or unintended by Todd Phillips or Joaquin. From what I know of Joaquin, and maybe they what he tapped into there, I don't believe that was unintended. Todd Phillips, it was just so perfectly constructed that it had to be intended. But what Steve said is spot on about the Joker, and I believe that's what the genius of it is that they took this iconic character in the age of comic book movies, which is obviously popular, right? They took this iconic character and they used that as a platform to reach the masses. But then you leave and you're like, what the
That ain't a comic book movie.
no, it's but if you think about it, if you really truly think about it, and I do, I do think about these dark characters because I think that goes back to me being an actor, right? So I'm always trying to look at how you tap into that character, and you know one of the things you learn as an actor is you have to create a backstory. If you want your character to be real, to have depth, there'd be times where I'd have one scene in a film or a supporting character in a play, and I would write a 90 to 100-page bio on this 5 6 pages of dialogue that I would have, so that my character had depth. So when I see these villains, I'm always curious, like the Riddler. It's real easy to make that a caricature, right? And most people do when it's popcorn fare. But I always wonder, well, what really motivated this person to behave in such an erratic fashion, right? To be so over the top with it, and the Joker was always one of those. And I think Heath Ledger really kind of spun these villainous characters in that direction. You know, because they were still going comic book like with Jack Nicholson when he played the Joker. It was still really comic book and more caricature than you really didn't get into the depth. But I'm always curious about what drives a person to lose their shit in that way.
See, you use the word villain. I didn't equate the Joker as a villain.
Well, that's a character. That's the
Anti-hero?
caricature.
What's that?
Anti-hero.
Not even that. Like he was the hero in my.
Well, see, and that's the other commentary on today, right? So when I got real uncomfortable, so I've had my bouts with mental health. I still struggle with PTSD all the time, and I have to. And for the most part, that condition is marginalized, right? You hear it. It's used in common language a lot. People are far more familiar with it now than they ever were before. It was a veteran mental illness, and now they know it's much more, right? But I personally, and I think a lot of people that have mental conditions, which I would say as a lot of us, we feel marginalized, right? It's not, if I have cancer, I can go talk to you about that, and you kind of understand because there's a physical ailment, there's something physical about it. People don't take the mental ailment as an ailment. It's one of those things where people are real quick to say, well, just get over it. Well, just don't think that way, right? And the way society marginalized him and pushed him to the side. I remember that scene that was real powerful to me when he's going and he's trying to talk about his feelings. I always have dark thoughts. I always have dark thoughts. You're not listening to me. I'm sorry, but the state has shut us down. Like that hit me. I was like, holy shit. I mean, because that happens, right?
Yeah. So I'm watching it, and there was a time in my life when like things were that hard for me,
Mm-hmm.
and like I was feeling those feelings, you know, working a shit job, and like the kid stole a sign,
Yeah.
and then he come back and like, where's the sign, and like, you know, the boss and all that stuff, and then I remember, you know, when I first got into recovery, you know, I was depressed for a while, like, you know, my brain was healing, and this doctor put me on a bunch of psych meds and shit, and I remember like having to go around, like, you know, they were like, we're not going to give you your medication anymore here. And I remember calling like Oakland County Mental Health, like you hooked me on this shit,
Mm-hmm.
and now like I got to go fight to stay on it. And like, cause I like there were times where I was like, well, I'm just going to go off it, and I'd have like a complete fucking manic episode. Not to mention, I mean, I didn't have much spiritual training at the time, but
Because they don't give you any.
it was just like where you're never catching a break. Like I just never caught a break. I could never catch a break, and the depression got deeper, and it got a lot darker. And then, I'm going to look out into the external, and I'm going, you know, to snap eventually,
Yes.
and I was walking around suicidal, and like there were bouts of like suicidalness throughout my life. It's just always been part of since I was a kid, and I can't really explain it. It just like I can send myself into a depression with my thinking or how someone treats me, and if the life part isn't moving forward, I could really easily get dark quick and stay dark, and I don't know how to get out. Like I didn't know how to get out of the darkness back then. I wasn't going to Unity. I was doing a bunch of 12-step meetings, but I mean, if your spiritual game is real low and you're hanging out in 12-step meetings, it's dark there too.
It's dark everywhere.
And like it, and I never like I was finally, God threw me someone that like grabbed me by the hand and was like, dude, like, let me show you something. Like, you are not your thoughts. You need to understand that. Thoughts come and go. Thinking comes and goes. That does not make your character who you are. And I didn't understand, and so like it was all a process. And I'm watching this guy on the screen, like, go home, and I remember like the whole scene with the girl, the next door neighbor,
Right.
and how like remember like I don't want to. If there's any no spoiler alert, but like if you haven't seen it, like I don't know what you're gonna do, but where he had imagined the relationship.
Right.
And like there have been times in my life where like I won't go that far, but like I have imagined stuff. I have built a story into my mind, and I told myself that story long enough in my alcoholism and in my where I believed it.
Well, he was. So I've been there too, but there's a difference between somebody who bipolar is somewhat manufactured, right? We all have mood swings, and then but when you start getting to the level of manic and schizophrenic, which he obviously was schizophrenic to a certain degree,
With an anxiety disorder,
right,
to boot.
I mean, because there's an accumulation that gets you to that place. So he was obviously schizophrenic. So for a person like that, that's not where society needs to be playing games with their meds, because that's a person that I'm anti-med for the most part. I've tried it, don't believe in it. I think for a person that has the cognitive ability to sit with a therapist, and a therapist can only do so much, but they can give you tools. And then if you have the cognitive ability to go home and sit with those thoughts and work yourself through it, you should not be on meds, or you should be on meds as a precursor to the therapy, which has to. But a person with schizophrenia, you don't fuck around with their meds because they're not going to snap out of that.
Most people are on meds and not getting any therapy.
Well, and that's a whole other thing, and but that's the point I'm saying is like
they go hand in hand. The meds and the therapy go hand in hand. I was just stuck on all the shit like post acute withdrawal syndrome. You're depressed, take the shit. The next thing you know, when the shit stops working, they give me another form or another cocktail of like Zyprexa or Zeriquil or fucking Depakote. I mean, I was on that shit for the better part of like 14 years.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And then like
a lot of people don't come back from that.
It was like me and my God had come up with a plan. Like, I'm gonna get off this shit, and like, I need you to put someone in my path to help me get off that. And I found a Reiki healer who really taught me a lot about spiritual growth, and was like, I can't tell you how, but like, you need to listen to your God and follow the instruction that you get. And it took me almost a year to lean off everything. And then like you still recover. You're gonna recover for years after that shit.
Well, and the difference between you and somebody with schizophrenia is that they don't have that ability. What they need meds. There's such a chemical imbalance that's been exacerbated over time that they can't listen to somebody say, your God. So he's obviously an exaggerated version of a good chunk of the American population, right? When it comes to meds, so he's an exaggerated version, and he had been told his entire life, "Well, just put on a smile,
Yeah.
right? Put on a happy face. That's how you deal with it. You put on a happy face and you pretend." And he developed it, which I thought was genius. This condition where he laughs when he's upset.
Yeah.
That nuanced performance, like I wanted to fist fight Joaquin Phoenix for getting that and being able to put that out there. I'm like, you son of a bitch, just that actor jealousy. But I'm watching it, I'm like, wow, man, that was so nuanced. But the thing with when they pulled his meds from him, when they pulled his therapy, it was such a statement on the way that mental health is marginalized. And then to take it further, when he snaps, how can he not snap, right? But Russell Brand had and that's probably the only person I've watched, and that was by accident because I tried to stay away from interviews with people's takes on the movie and whatever because I knew we were going to do this, so I wanted to come in with my own take. But I watched Russell Brand because I always watch Russell Brand, and he had his take on it was, well, you have this marginalized character, right? That feels like they're not being seen, and he viewed it as when he comes into the Joker, when he commits that first murder, he now feels like he's being seen. So, in a very dark way, that's a form of self-actualization. This person has now emerged. Now I'm seen. I've been self-actualized. Is that an antithesis to what we would say the guiding force and principles of the universe are in compassion?
So the subway scene, you know, you watch these like what would you equate them to, like three stockbrokers,
Mhm.
you know, borderline
Trump's kids.
yeah Trump's
You know what I
kids,
mean? Like,
you know,
honestly.
borderline and you know sexually assaulting a girl,
Right.
and like you know him sticking up for the girl, and then those three decide to pick on him. Like I would have probably acted the same way. I probably would have done the same thing.
And that's why the movie is so damn good because there's so much gray area, right? Like, you probably wouldn't have killed those people, you know, but maybe you would have if you had a gun. But maybe, you know, and that's the commentary that they make is that we're all on the verge of snapping, and if you can justify that visceral response, which might be walking into a school and shooting it, right? It could be that. We've seen that, it seems to be far more widespread than it ever was.
You know, I read something on Facebook. Someone commented on the movie, and they were like, "Nothing more than a glamorization of the lone wolf man." And I was like, "That doesn't match the movie the way that I saw it." And then, like, you know, I'm like, I had to follow, like, look on the guy's profile, and I'm like, "Oh, it's from the United Kingdom." Of course, like. United Kingdom don't have the same problems we have here. And I just was like, I didn't see that at all.
Well, they have the National Health Care Service. You know, they
Right.
have better health care than us,
And
from what I hear.
I think the income disparity in that country isn't as wide as it is here.
But they have it.
It's there, but it's not.
And it's getting
to
worse.
It's getting worse all over the world.
And no, it's not. And Europe is nothing like the United States. I mean, there's foods that we pump into our. I try not to anymore in my kids' bodies, but sometimes it's hidden that are just banned in Europe.
What's
you can't
that?
even get that garbage. A lot of
Corn
the
syrup?
dyes and Monsanto for sure. Like it's not there.
Yeah,
Like of
yeah.
course they fucking banned it, but over here it's still legal. So
On that, I had a friend that went to Amsterdam, and he was severely allergic to corn syrup here. Like anything that had sugar in it, he couldn't eat here. He went to Amsterdam, he could eat anything.
yeah,
Because the corn syrup that we use is fuel over there. You're not allowed to eat it.
yeah.
Is that what you're going on about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's the truth. Like
Yeah.
a lot of what we have in our food is banned over there. So it's different. It's different, but you know, they're going through their thing in the UK. But I can understand why somebody would say that. It's
How many murders are here in the United States? Isn't it like
More than 10.
Yeah, it's like 10,000, isn't it? Like 10,000 gun deaths a year in
Way more
America.
than
Yeah,
that.
it's more than
like
that.
And how
200,000
many
or
is it
something.
in like the United Kingdom? I think it's like 10.
4.
Yeah, 4 or 5.
it's not the same.
It's not.
It's not the same when it comes to gun violence. and I don't think this was a glamorization at all, but rather an accurate portrayal of if you ignore people who have mental health problems. I don't think it was a threat, but it was, look, pay attention, because if somebody's suffering and you don't understand it, well, it's kind of like the Holocaust. Like when I took my kids there, I just wanted them to see. I didn't want to threaten them and say you should fear for everything because this could happen. It wasn't about that. It's that when human suffering goes unattended, this is the possibility. Is this an extreme version? Yeah, but it's also reality. So that's what I saw. I didn't see it as a glamorization whatsoever. I saw it as a very accurate portrayal of what somebody who suffers
See,
from
I
mental
didn't
health
look at
issues.
it as extreme because I could relate. You know what I mean? Like,
Extreme in the way that he went about it, the talk show and
yeah,
everything.
well,
it was
just
painted.
it was a perfect picture. You know, he
Right.
got because like didn't they he did his like stand up comedy and someone was filming it and like all that and then they invite him on the show
To make fun
and,
of him.
yeah, to make fun of him, and I was just like, oh man, like talk about like genius scripting.
I was
you
just
know?
gonna say, like, as you guys are painting the picture for me, it literally sounds like you're talking about Taxi Driver with a clown.
It is. It really is. It's really done in that
Travis
vein.
Bickle.
It's very Travis Bickle like. But his
Because he
mental
was
condition is different.
marginalized, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the mental
And he
condition
slowly
is
goes
different.
downhill,
Right.
and he eventually ends up trying to do his thing by assassinating somebody, right?
Difference is Travis Bickle thinks he's a hero, so he's trying to
Yeah.
engage in heroic acts and
Yeah. The moral
Yeah.
compass is a little different.
Well, you're not allowed to say that. You said he was your hero.
I didn't
The
say
Joker is a hero.
I didn't
Remember,
say
he's not a villain.
no, but he was a
yeah. I'll still say he's a hero.
in a weird way he was the protagonist, right? He's the protagonist.
Society
You can
was the antagonist.
you can relate to his what he's fighting against. I was talking about earlier the part that when I just started to shudder because I understood all of that. It made absolute sense to me. I've had my struggles and I think about this anyway. So when these guns shoot as a spiritual person, somebody who's trying to really walk the walk, when a school shooting happens or a terrorist attack happens, if somebody's head gets cut off, when these things happen, I really try to dig into what led, rather than pointing the finger and saying how disgusting and because it is a horrible thing. I try to what led this person to that. How can I be a light, an antithesis to that darkness? But the thing that when I I literally shuddered when they carry him out to the car, to the hood of the car,
Yeah.
and you see this society is obviously sick, and you can very easily point at Thomas Wayne, who says they're all clowns. This is what happens in Trump politics, right? Where you're and in Hillary politics, where you're marginal deplorables and where you're pointing fingers at people and making them feel less than. You're going to create an underbelly in society, and eventually that underbelly is going to rise to the top because they're not going to take it anymore. And when they brought him out to the hood of that car, and they all surrounded him, and he becomes there he is self-actually. He becomes this Jesus-like character in this sick society. I'm like, so that's how somebody like a Hitler, and Trump's nowhere near Hitler, but the sentiment that he preys on is that it's a dysfunctional, sick society that's angry, feels marginalized, and they're not going to take it anymore. So when you prey on that sentiment, which he did not intentionally, like a Travis Bickle did, when you prey on that sentiment, that's how that type of leadership rises in a society, and they support it. And you know
Well, it
what?
works.
The
Yeah.
fight is valid. Yeah, we are fighting
We're
against
seeing
greed.
it.
The only
Yeah.
thing though,
We've
like
seen it before.
when you look at today's society, like Trump represents like the wealthy, a lot of the wealthy folks who are wanting more money. You know, it's all a business. The presidency was a business move for Trump.
Yeah.
And the 1%. Trump goes in and like makes cuts, says racist stuff, and then all of a sudden, like America is a melting pot. Whether it don't matter, it's a melting pot of all nationalities, all religions, and so now you've alienated the melting pot.
Well, that's going to happen in a 50-50 society.
Yeah,
Right.
only a portion
But
of the
but then
melting pot.
like
We're
when
going
you
to piss off 50% of everybody.
when but the 1% is the only one reaping any benefits from.
In divide and conquer, that's
Yeah.
the only faction that reaps any true benefits.
So now you have the underbelly, like you speak of, is the majority of the citizens of the country.
Not when you divide them, though. That's
Well,
what
yeah,
Trump did.
because
That was
if I preach racism and classism and stuff, guess what?
you divided the
You
underbelly.
divided because guess what?
Now you can't rise.
Steve's got more than me.
Right,
Steve's got a better car than me.
and it's his fault that I don't have a better
and it's
car.
his fault. He's taking my job.
Yeah.
You know, and fuck him.
Yeah.
I need to get him.
So now there is no underbelly that rises because we're too busy
We're too
fighting
busy
each other.
fighting
Yes.
each other.
Divide and conquer.
Divide
It's-
and conquer.
It's
Yeah.
as old as time.
Right, right. I mean, I don't know how many. I don't know how much Trump reads, but
That's a
he
good
had to have
explanation.
read *The Prince* by Machiavelli, right? This is just old
Yeah,
politics,
yeah. This
right?
is
old
100%
politics.
the Prince.
But that
Some
was there
people
was
don't
commentary,
know- Some people don't know that The Prince was a satire. They take it seriously.
right?
And I think we see that quite often.
We do,
Like used it as a handbook.
Yeah.
Like, no, that's not good.
right, right. No, that's not really what you're supposed to do.
Right. Don't eat your children either, by the way.
or do. You know what I mean? And that's the thing. So when this person makes that comment, well, that's how they felt about it, and you can't negate the fact
No,
that somebody said that okay, well, I got to look at that and say, could it be glamorized? Yeah, there might be that kid out there that says, yeah, that's exactly how I'm feeling. Fuck the world, but they're already feeling that. That's not going to prompt somebody to do it, but they might view it in that way. When I made Life Goes On, it's a story about addiction, right? And it's an exaggerated version. It's not even that exaggerated because my friend died, and that's why the movie ended that way. But there was a lot being said by the way that film played out. I'm trying to go back to I just thought about the thing that led it to. It wasn't how people wanted it to end. People wanted a fluffy ending. But there was so much gray that I felt was important to convey. And this was obviously on a much smaller level than what they've done with the Joker. But the entire film lives in that gray area that society lives in. And with Life Goes On, it's easy to look at that depending on where you are in your current mental state and say, well, this movie was a glamorization of the drug culture. Because the guy, the character was cool. He had the girls, he had this, all these things that me personally, I was trying to kill that person off when I wrote that movie, trying to kill him off. And I took it that's what I did. Essentially was I killed, as a writer, I was killing cool events. Now, there's the people who still to this day, I'll get people commenting on Life Goes On and how it's one of their favorite movies and, oh, we're fucked up watching Life Goes On. That's not what it's for, man. But who am I to say what it's
Right.
for?
What's that? You always say that quote. It's a Jesus quote, and I should know better.
There's a few of them.
It's the I am in this world, but not of this world.
Yeah, I'm in it, but I'm not of it.
Yeah. So the thing about the Joker is that it brought me back into the world. Like it started having me analyze like society again and looking at all this, and it brought up like a bunch of dark matter that I had suppressed. Maybe not suppressed, but maybe I
Haven't
haven't
thought
looked
about?
I haven't looked at it a long time. So when I got out, like, I have to remember that saying. That saying means a lot.
Means everything.
It means everything. Because I need to remind myself that like I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. I don't want to say none of it's real, but like if I take what's on the news and if I take what's in the media all the time at face value, I will literally spiral into a depression if I look at it and internalize everything.
Absolutely.
It's designed that way.
to do
Yeah,
that.
and I don't know if it's a conspiracy or if it's just the way that it is, and some people found a way to prey on the human condition, right? To profit.
Right.
I don't know that it's to
I think
Go
it
buy a
sells.
bottle.
Yeah, I don't know that it's malicious, but I
Maybe
do
it
think
didn't start out as malicious because it just sells.
It
People
sells.
like bad shit. They love hearing bad stories.
and if
and
people found
tragedy.
out, well, I can make money off that.
Yeah, and
I-
then we got
I can rise to
CNN, and
power.
we talk about it for 24 hours a day.
Yeah,
And they didn't think about the health repercussions about that. Like, well, what will the society think if we bombard them with bad news 24 hours a day?
and I don't care because I gotta sell it, sell
I think-
because I benefit from it. Steve said we had a comment.
Oh yeah, we have a comment on Facebook from Rachel Nicole. It says, my mother had schizophrenia, and I really love that you touched on the fact that he just wanted to be seen talking about the Joker. Like it was exhilarating to be seen. My mother was brought up in a wealthy home with a workaholic father that ended up raping her to age 13, and a nutcase of a mother who always talked down to her and turned a blind eye, screaming and yelling at all the kids, threatening suicide. My mother was heroin addicted at 16, psychotropic meds, electroshock therapy, like the whole thing, approved by the grandmother, all this shit until she died at 40. I feel as though her condition was a creation of her environment and carried even further by the choices she made just to relieve the suffering. Thanks for your comment.
Thank you. That's deep,
That's
but that's exactly
So I'm always
that's
gonna,
who that
I'm a-
character's a part of.
Yeah. So I have this God-shaped hole that we talked about before. You know, a lot of us have it, and I am unsettled normally in around people. I'll have an anxiety disorder of some sort, right? What happens when I take my first drink or drug? I feel like the fucking planets have all aligned.
Numbs the
Like-
pain.
Like, I feel right with the world. I can now talk with people, and the drink and the drug is now my solution. It's my medicine. So what happens is after a while, that shit will not work. And if I ever become physically dependent on it, which most of us do, now I'm really fucked. Because now I don't know how to operate without it, and I'm physically dependent. And I'm gonna keep using until my and the funny thing is, like, they're all depressants. So what used to make me feel good no longer makes me feel good. It's working against me. And now I'm locked in.
And you need more and more.
And I
every
need more
time
and more
until
until
you overdose.
that or someone presents to me some form of spiritual solution, whatever it is, to help me hope. I needed hope.
Something that you should already have.
Normally.
It should be
but,
free.
Yeah.
but did you know you needed hope?
I did not. I had no hope. It had diminished,
Did you
and I thought I was going to die. I have a few suicide attempts underneath my belt, and one was almost complete. And even after I got out of the hospital and everything, I went right back to drinking because I didn't have. I did not know there was any form of real help. I didn't know where to look. I was of the nature that most alcoholics, like real alcoholics, like I'm an all around, every day, every second drinker. I thought we just died because that's what had half my family tree had some form of alcoholism, and many of them did die from alcoholism. And so I just thought, well, I'm 23. Hopefully, this will be over by the time I'm 25.
Yeah, when it comes to alcoholism, when it comes to the choice to seek refuge that way, when it comes to that, because I've had my bouts with substance abuse, and Gabor Mate spun addiction in a way that I'd never heard prior to. I always knew that I was looking for something, right? So I think there's still hope. I think there's a faith that's ingrained in even the alcoholic who on the surface feels hopeless, but there's a faith in that there's something on the other side, because I think the drive towards mood altering substances is in a way an act of empowerment, because you can feel different, right? Now, for going back to Rachel's comment for the schizophrenic, they don't have that at their disposal.
No.
They live in a state of schizophrenia, and what I took from the movie is, well, sometimes people just want to be seen, when you engage in substance abuse, you don't have to be seen because you don't give a fuck, right? You really don't have to be seen because that will numb all that shit out. That basic human drive that we have towards connection. Because again, going back to Gabor Mate and even Carl Jung, when you talk about addiction, what is it? Well, I've lost a part of myself and I'm using any means necessary to get back to it. The schizophrenic doesn't have access back to that because the chemical imbalance is so strong that they just can't get there.
But most of us have all have some form of trauma
Absolutely.
that has incurred somewhere along the line. The trauma is almost
Trumps everything.
trumps, but it almost is the fabric of every single addict alcoholic.
Oh yeah,
Without
It's-
a doubt.
it's usually
You know,
and schizophrenia.
having been an
And-
addict as
yeah.
well. I didn't have a coping mechanism, so I went to pills,
Yeah.
and it solved my issue until I didn't have any pills, and then I was empty again.
Gotta look again.
Exactly.
What is there now? I can't imagine being in the space of a schizophrenic or a manic that when the episode happened, well, PTSD, I've blacked out twice, sober, disassociated completely. But I was gone, so I don't know what that felt like. I was there 1 minute and then I was gone the next. So I don't really know, I don't know where that transition lied. You know what I mean? It was just snap.
I've journaled while manic before, and I still have the journals, and
Same here. Doesn't make any sense.
it doesn't make any sense.
But it does.
But the thing is, what's fucked up is that what I journaled, I can understand why I was journaling it at the time.
Because of code.
Yeah, a lot of it is code. A lot of it is systems within the systems of the brain that were like trying to be decoded at the time, but like I can't decode it, and it's a little fucked up. But
So
It
when you
doesn't come
start
down to a language.
when you
Yeah, I mean,
start to
it's
get
written
your
a lot
wit
of it.
when you start to get your wits back about it, and this would happen to me every time I would go off the deep end and I would come back. So there'd be a 3-day period where I'm real in touch with whatever that is, with my higher self. There's the ego's been diminished, and all I feel is a connection to something bigger than me. There's no ego to stand on. One day will pass, the next day will pass, and then slowly but surely I'll start to feel the ego coming back into play. Now it's coming back to protect me from all that is bad, perceivably bad out there. And I start to look at the things that I wrote and I start to judge myself. Oh, toss that poem, toss that poem, toss that right. What the fuck was I thinking? I start judging myself. When in reality, that's where the beauty is. On the last episode I had, I said, I want to be that guy in those 3 days. That's who I am in truth. And I want to find a way to live that way. I want to live in that space without having to create the breakdown to get there. So when you come out, there's probably, I'd say there's a lot of beauty in what you wrote, but when our ego comes back, we can't decode it anymore. It's kind of like a psychedelic experience where you go to this place and then you come back and you just know how that felt, but you can't make sense of it.
I can still look at it and understand what I was going through at the time.
That's important.
I can set my ego aside. Like those days were like rough days, and like I always thought journaling it out would somehow like. Sometimes you just when you're manic like that, man, it's like, dude, I just gotta write, like vodka
Yeah,
straight out the
like-
bottle, like
Yeah.
like like a typewriter, and like I mean there's notebooks that I plowed through in like 2 days, like 120 pages written.
When you were manic, did you feel like this is how it was for me? Like I would write in a state, and the reason I was writing in the first place is to capture myself, because I felt like I was slipping away, and I needed to grab onto what it was that I was thinking, because
Yeah.
it was the right way
Yeah.
to be thinking if I could just hold on to it and become that all the time.
So it's like my mind going in 2 million different directions all at once, but it's like they're all leading one thought to another, and they're branching out like spider webs. So I thought that if I wrote it all down, I would be able to follow,
Piece it back together.
like piece it back together. A lot of times I thought like, there was some form of spiritual downloading going on that, like
What else could it be?
I need to break this down, and if I write it out, then I can break it down. Some of it was just thoughts of a manic depressive. with a substance abuse disorder.
You know, on that, so the original Joker, which I consider to be Jack Nicholson, was like the gangster, right? And then Heath Ledger was the psychopath. Who is this guy? Which Joker is this? What
He's
was
the
you guys
real
call him?
person.
Yeah, he's like
He's the human being.
he's yeah. With the thing that I found interesting was is that this Joker didn't have any substance abuse disorder.
He was on meds,
He was on meds.
and then they took his meds, and then he
they
stopped
took his
taking
meds,
his meds.
but I don't think I ever saw him drinking in the movie. I can't remember.
That's a message right there. That's a message right there, isn't it?
No, and yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, there was a big commentary on mental health. I mean, it's so, and that was one of the more poignant ones that it's really hard to miss. That he was unstable, he was on meds, and then it culminated to where he wasn't going to be marginalized anymore, or got off his. But he didn't have a substance abuse problem.
Even when he was trying to track down the origin, what his mom was saying, and Bruce Wayne, how Thomas Wayne is going to help us, and all this stuff, and that you look that was his mom schizophrenic as well, or did you think that she really did have an affair with Thomas Wayne, and he really was Thomas Wayne's son, but the wealthy have the means and the power to cover shit up anyway? Are you being fed a bunch of lies?
Possible.
That I think that was always like my hardest thing with life was there's always like a conspiracy. Like I'm a conspiracy theorist out of the womb. Like I came out that way. And so like it I had to learn on like how to shut that down. Because like life's not like that. Are there conspiracies? Sure. But like life isn't one big conspiracy.
No.
And it took a long time to unravel that. And I still see people today, they're like thinkers. And I'm like, like you're a thinker, aren't you? And they'll be like, yeah, how can you tell? I'm like, just by the way you talk. Like you have figured out every single angle, or are trying to figure out every single angle of every situation every second of the day. And they're like, how do you know that? And I'm like, because I can just tell. And I'm like, you're going to want to learn on how to shut that off.
Yeah, before it becomes obsessiveness like I've had to deal with.
Because if you don't learn on how to shut that off, like you're always tired. You're always tired. It's hard to see joy. I'm just stuck. I'm just stuck in my mind. And it's funny. I was listening to this talk by Ram Dass the other day, and I've been going to sleep to some of his talks, and he was like, one of the most important things you learn by meditation is that you are not your thoughts.
That's
You
the
are,
most important.
but it's hard to teach that because like I
Yeah.
identify in my
Thoughts.
mind.
Thoughts as objects, yeah, it's really hard to get your head around. That's why you need training to do it.
So I read this book, and it's really advanced on consciousness. It's Rupert Spira, essays on the nature of consciousness, essays on the merging of consciousness and matter and it's Rupert Spira, great book. But it's one of those books where I could only read a chapter max, and then I would go into contemplation, and then I might have to go back and read it again. But one of the really simple, I don't want to call it a trick, but one of the really simple questions you can ask yourself that will snap you into a meditative mode, and maybe not for long, maybe you're not trained in meditation in that way, but who am I that's aware of my thoughts right now? It's a real simple question to ask yourself. Who am I? Because there's obviously somebody that's observing your thoughts as they happen. And if you ask yourself that, who is that? It's me, but who am I that's observing my thoughts right now? As I'm speaking, there's somebody watching me do this. Maybe not physically, they don't see, but they can see my hands and they hear me talking. And then it's questioning, are the things that you're saying, are you in agreement with that? Like this is a constant thing that's happening that supersedes the words that are coming out of my mouth, the thoughts that are running through my head. It's something that's above that. It's meta, and that's once you realize that it's I don't want to say it's easy, but you can detach from
It's
from
more
the thoughts.
likely that you will because you have a tool now.
You can go
That
back
sounds
and
a
just
lot
ask-
like Sam Harris waking up, like the same sort of.
I wouldn't doubt
looking
that
at
Sam
it.
Harris read Rupert Spira's book. You know what I mean? Because there's no separation in. It's funny that people just. I'm reading a book right now by Sean Carroll. It's called Something Deeply Hidden, and the way he speaks is deeply spiritual to me. Yet he would call himself an atheist, and that's okay. You can be an atheist, and he would say that the way that you act does not affect anything in this universe. Yet he's a quantum physicist, and his entire book is about quantum mechanics and the way that quantum particles interact with one another. How could the way you act not affect everything around you? It has to. But I think we get when you have a certain belief. If you call yourself an atheist, that's a strong belief. That's as strong as saying there's definitely a God. There's no doubt that there's a God in the way that I believe that there's God. An atheist would be the same way. Definitely no God.
There's
in
no
the way.
such thing as an actual atheist because nobody has any evidence that there isn't one.
Well, that doesn't mean there's not an atheist. Just like there's Christians who would say, if you don't believe in Jesus, you're not getting to heaven. Is there any fact? Is there any factual? And absolutely not. So there's atheists that will say there's absolutely nothing. We're worm food. That's it. How do you know? Well, because of this, this, and this. But do you really know? Can you provide evidence that supports? Well, no, but that's what I believe. So it comes down to a belief.
Right. And well, in knowing definitions of words, like I call myself an agnostic because I'm not going to say like I know for a fact there isn't a God.
An agnostic, I think, is a lot more common these days.
Yeah, I allow
Acceptable.
for their.
Agnostic
It
means
could
without
be possible.
knowledge.
Yeah.
It could
Without
absolutely be
knowledge.
possible, but I don't see, the God that's been explained to me since I was like, 3 or 4.
I
I
don't
don't
either.
see that Abrahamic God around doing the thing.
Well, and it doesn't even
I
make
had, I, had
sense.
to, I had to ditch that one.
Yeah, it doesn't even
That,
make
makes
sense.
that one want to be dead.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it always made you feel less than and
Yeah.
guilty and
Guilt, shame.
yeah. It was a different kind of God that was going on there. But
You're bad and you should feel bad.
Yeah.
well, what
yeah.
the fuck is this
Created you.
original sin shit?
Yeah.
I'm born, so all of a sudden I'm a sinner. I'm less than, and unless I bow to this thing, I can't go there. I'm like, how do I make my life better here right now? Like, what do I do for that?
Right.
But that Rupert Spira book.
We just shared that on Facebook as well, so you guys can get a hold of that. if you want
Amazing book. It's an amazing book, and it speaks of. I don't want to get too much into the book, but read it. If you're a study on consciousness and the nature of reality, it's from a scientific mind that speaks in a way that allows for the possibility of a God, but doesn't say that there's an absolute God, and not in the conventional sense. It allows for you to really look at consciousness as God and say that, there's two ways to view the world. There's material, there's the materialist that says everything, our consciousness included, sprung forth from a big bang where matter led to consciousness. And then there's the consciousness first. Everything in the universe is conscious interaction at some level or another. Quantum physics would support that. It would absolutely support it. That's why when I read Sean Carroll's book, and he says that he speaks in terms of material first, and it just doesn't. The way that quantum particles, the universe is a wave function, right? At its core in quantum mechanics, everything is a wave function.
Everything is a field.
It's field. Well, the wave, right? That's what it is. It's this infinite wave. Well, they don't know if it's infinite or confined to whatever we see in the observable universe, but it's a wave. How does the wave collapse? Conscious interaction, measurement. Something has to happen that causes the wave function to collapse. That is consciousness. Maybe it's not human consciousness. Maybe that level of consciousness can't contemplate its existence, but consciousness has to happen in order for all of this to happen. I don't know how we got into all this when we were talking about the Joker, but that's why I love the movie, because talking about that can lead into these types of conversations. That's why I love it. There needs to be more of them. But Sean, you were going to say something. We got off on a tangent.
I was just gonna say,
Speaking of chicken,
You're one individual that you read a lot of books. Like, where do you find the time to read all these books?
I don't know. I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated by them. You know, and I don't get through all of them because I can, and it's real quick too. I can watch. So Sean Carroll, I saw on Joe Rogan. I'm like, that fascinates me. I'm going to go there, and then I'll start to read something, and then my mind starts to go. Then I start to formulate my own opinions, and then I'll dig in research someplace over here. But I'm a quick read too. You know, I'll get into it, and then I don't know. Somehow my brain pushes out things that don't interest me. You know, I'm able to read through it, and I'm not going to remember that, but I'll take the information that I need. I don't read as much as I'd like to, even. You know.
Yeah.
for me, it's also if I have zero understanding or background in something, I have to read it a lot slower. Whereas if I were to pick up like a Carl Sagan book or something, I know a lot of that.
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
read a lot of
yeah.
that before, so I have a basis and I can skip over things. Like, okay, I know where he's going with that.
That's kind of how the
I
Sean
get this
Carroll
part.
book is. I'm looking for these little snippets that are gonna. I really want to think. I want to think, and I don't want. I don't get caught up. I don't need to know. My ego wants to know what God is. My higher self could give a shit because it already knows. So it doesn't matter. But I don't get compulsive with the information that I take in. It's I love quantum physics for the spiritual implications. Somebody like Sean Carroll would say there are no spiritual implications. It's just physics. I don't believe that. That's okay. You know what I mean? And
You're talking
maybe
about the woo woo.
the woo woo,
The
yeah,
woo-woo.
the woo woo, yeah. And then Joe Rogan would talk about the woo woo too. And granted, there's a lot of woo woo out there. Like no, yes, we are quantum systems, but the quantum field is not a wishing well. You know what I mean? And they would say that in the mastermind too. It's not a fucking wishing well. You can't just want things to happen and think good about yourself, and all of a sudden life's good. You got to do some shit. And sometimes the quantum field works against that, and there's resistance.
A lot of
That's-
times I found that the resistance was like my higher self kind of dipping, like getting me out of the way for something that I really don't want. I
Yeah.
always think like, well, I'm not getting this, and like I'm manifesting this, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing that, and like it ain't really happening, and like why the fuck is it not happening? And like it's like I can every now and then if I just settle down, like God be like, no, you don't need that. You don't need that going on right now. I'm gonna have to like that's a flyby. Flying that one by. Sorry, yo. That one won't do you no good right now. It'll only do you harm. And it's like, shit. What am I gonna do now? And it's like back to the drawing board. But I don't know. It's all metaphysics for me. All the metaphysical world is all that I read about. Like my last book was Joseph Campbell, like A Return to Bliss. or
Love
something.
Joseph.
And once halfway through it, it got over my head. It started going into this. It was like a,
Joseph Campbell went over your head. No
Yeah.
way.
like
Oh my
I just
God.
I was having a tough time, and I'm like, I'm gonna put this down and like pick up fractal time. Like 12-dimensional stuff. 'cause
Oh,
I
that
couldn't-
sounds much
I know
easier.
because I couldn't handle the psychology of Joseph Campbell, so I'm gonna go look at fractal time.
We got the 2 minutes, and I just want to, this final thing on the Joker. Definitely go see it. Definitely go see it with an open mind. But the takeaway for me is pay attention to people. There's an innate desire to feel connection with other human beings, and when you marginalize people, because you can't understand, you categorize people, you put them in a box, and you make them feel alienated. I'm not saying that somebody's gonna. People do snap. That's the reality. Pay attention. Seek to understand. You know what I mean? Just seek to understand. That's what I took away from it. Seek to understand, and the Holocaust doesn't happen. Maybe it does. You know what I mean? But that's where it starts in our individual desire or drive to be a light. And what a light does is it illuminates. It doesn't cast out in the darkness. And this guy with schizophrenia was cast into darkness.
What's that old saying? The only sane reaction to an insane world is insanity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great episode. I want to make sure that you show them the flyer.
Oh, yeah. So way up here, Gobble Gobble Give. It'll be posted on our page. It's a great event. It's a drive to feed and clothe the homeless. Last year we got, about 4,000 people. We go to the places where they congregate and we deliver food to them. It's a great event, but check out our page for updates. We'll be posting. There's a meeting coming up on November 3rd, and we'll keep you informed on that. Thank you for tuning in. We could have kept this going for another